The Nasdaq and the S&P 500 closed with losses after hitting record highs intraday. The Dow, on the other hand, gains in a volatile session on Wall Street. European markets closed largely higher as the Bank of England keeps rates unchanged. Asian markets trade mixed, with the Japanese Nikkei gaining after the release of the inflation data for the month of May. The GIFT Nifty is suggesting a flat start for the Indian market. Crude prices remain range-bound, with Brent trading around $85 a barrel. Gold rises to a two-week high as hopes of an impending rate cut by the Federal Reserve raises demand. A Delhi court grants conditional bail to Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal in the money laundering case linked to the liquor policy scam. The trial court rejected the Enforcement Directorate's plea for a stay on the bail order for 48 hours to approach the High Court. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to lead celebrations by the Dal Lake in Srinagar on the occasion of the 10th International Yoga Day. The event will see over 7,000 people participating and joining the Prime Minister in performing yoga, keeping in line with this year's theme of Yoga for Self and Society. Leaders like JP Nadda, Yogi Adityanath and Piyush Goyal also join in the celebrations across the country. And just like all of these leaders, I'm pretty sure a lot of you all would be also celebrating the Yoga Day today. But it's the final trading day of the week, and you're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18 in the Mumbai News Center. I'm Hormuz Patakia. Let's first take a look at the Asian markets as to how they are doing this morning. We just mentioned the Japanese markets were gaining this morning after the inflation data that was reported. But the same cannot be said for the other indices across the Asia Pacific, because the Taiwanese index is trading with losses of almost 1%, as is the Hang Seng, and that is trading with losses of over 1.25% this morning. And that is the Taiwanese index, remember, hit a record high this week, but since then has been in consolidation mode and now is seeing a bit of profit booking from higher levels. The Hang Seng also trading with losses of well over 1%. Pull up the GIFT Nifty as well. The Nifty has been in the consolidation mode of its own after hitting record highs. The implied open suggesting a mildly positive start for our own markets, around 16 points higher as of now. But moving over to Wall Street, when they resumed trading after the Juneteenth holiday, it was a mixed session there. The Dow Jones surged 300 points and gained for the third straight day. The S&P 500 briefly topped the 5,500 level but pulled back and closed about 14 points lower. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite, the day's underperformer, slipped 140 points. CNBC's Pippa Stevens gets us a wrap of all the big stock movers on Wall Street.
Well, shares of Dell Technologies and Supermicro jumped at one point on Thursday after Elon Musk said the two hardware makers will provide servers to help his artificial intelligence startup xAI develop a supercomputer. In a post on X, Musk said, quote, Dell is assembling half of the racks that are going into the supercomputer that xAI is building. But share gains later faded and the two stocks closed in the red. Meantime, Accenture gaining 7%, the second best stock in the S&P. The company did miss earnings estimates, but the share is getting a boost on growing AI sales. CEO Julie Sweet telling CNBC that Accenture saw more than $900 million in generative AI bookings for its third quarter, bringing it to $2 billion for the fiscal year. But Apple supplier Jabil sinking. That stock was the worst performer in the S&P after the company did beat earnings and revenue estimates in its latest report, but pointed to softness in its automotive and transportation markets. So from the worst to the best, that would be Gilead, the top S&P stock, Thursday, after the company said a late-stage trial of its HIV drug showed 100% efficacy for preventing the virus in women. The results bringing Gilead one step closer to broadening its HIV division, and those shares closed up 8%.
And as the S&P 500 reaches new highs, the BNY Wealth believes that large caps will lead further gains, while Citi has raised the year-end target to 5,600. Listen in.
We are constructive on markets. We are positive. We think the fundamentals are strong and in certain sectors getting better, raising the earnings for the S&P overall. So there are some charts that are asymptotic and that looks not healthy, but on the other hand, the fundamentals are increasing as well. And we're just very optimistic. We're overweight U.S. large cap. We've been that way for the last 2 years. Again, it's just been the right place to be, because in the end, Other countries are looking better than feared, but the growth here is so much stronger in the developed economies that you have to be invested here, we think.
The setup here is, when you think about it, fairly straightforward. When you look at the year-to-date index return, the way we break it down is that when we ran the math at 14% or so for the S&P, 5 percentage points of that came from NVIDIA, 4 percentage points came from the rest of the Mag 7. That left the remaining 493 within the S&P contributing about 5%. Essentially, what's been happening here is that the fundamental beat and raise dynamic for NVIDIA and the rest of the Mag 7 has stood out this year and has lifted expectations for that cohort of companies that in turn has influenced where broader S&P earnings are going. So to a certain degree, what we're really doing here is truing up our starting point for the year 5,100, which assumed a contribution from the Mag 7, but not to the extent that we're getting right now. So where we go from here, we're still looking for a very strong earnings follow through for that component of the market going into the end of the year.
Right.
We are looking for a contribution from the rest of the Mag 7. That becomes more of a story as we head into 2025, though.
If you want to get scared, take my old job and look at that Russell 2000. And what we were watching last Wednesday, while Powell was speaking in particular, was Russell relative to S&P. And you basically had this big pop on the CPI data. You gave almost all of it back by the afternoon, and small caps by the end of the week had made major new lows relative to the S&P. And so we see that nervousness being expressed in that discrete trade. However, it's not really being extrapolated to the broader market yet because of those defensive undertones. I do think their opportunity is there down the road. I do worry I do hear some people, not a ton, but I hear some people trying to make these bullish arguments on small cap because the cuts are coming. And I just feel like we need to wait and see. It's almost like listening to children who aren't listening to their parents, and they're just, determined to hear what they want to hear from the Fed. And I think there's going to be some disappointment on that timeline. Our camp at RBC is looking for a December cut, not a September cut. So when I still hear these September discussions, I feel like for this particular year, we may be still sitting up for a little bit of disappointment.
All the action from the US markets overnight, but moving across the Atlantic now to the European markets, where it was a strong day of gains there following 3 central bank decisions. The French CAC and the German DAX surged over 1%, while the British FTSE settled with gains of close to 70 points. Now, in an important central bank decision from the region, the Bank of England left rates unchanged at 5.25% in what was their last decision ahead of the crucial July general elections in the UK. The BOE policymakers, however, said that the decision to not cut rates this time around was finely balanced. The Swiss National Bank, meanwhile, cut rates by 25 basis points, citing easing pricing pressures, and Norway's central bank, on the other hand, opted to leave rates unchanged at a 16-year high and said that a cut was expected only in 2025. Now, as investors continue to debate on whether a rate cut from the Fed is on its way in September, the soft incoming economic data has got economists to discuss the risks of over-tightening by the Fed and other central bank actions. Let us listen in to what KPMG's Jane Swank had to say.
Yeah, I think we're in this sort of watchful waiting period where it's not whether or not central banks cut this year. The Bank of England much more dovish than even expected on their statement, leaning in that direction for August, hopefully. But the Federal Reserve also sort of wanting to make sure that they hit the landing and don't overshoot, although I do think the risk is still high that they do overshoot given some of the softening in economic data. And that's important. We've seen the Fed sort of push out their patience here to the extreme, and I think it's going to take an awful lot of good data for them to actually ease by September.
And it's time for a short break here on Power Breakfast. Up next, we tell you how all of these global cues that we just highlighted will impact our own markets. Stay tuned. Back on the other side. Back with us here on Power Breakfast, and now our research team is joining in with how the trade setup looks like, the stocks that are likely to be in the news, and the FNO setup for the day as well. First up, Vamakshi is joining in to get us all the market cues that we need to watch out for today. Vamakshi, good morning. Final trading day of the week. What's the setup looking like?
Well, absolutely, Hormaz. Let me first start off with the global markets. S&P 500 briefly topped 5,500 for the first time as Nvidia's market leadership continues. Nasdaq cooled off after hitting an all-time high, but the Dow Jones was an outlier. It was up nearly 0.8%. Moving on to the European markets, they also managed to close higher after the Swiss National Bank delivered a second interest rate cuts of 25 basis points to 1.25%. The Bank of England kept its interest rate unchanged at 5.25% in line with the expectations. The Indian markets, the range-bound action continues out here as well, and Nifty recovered from previous day's fall. And in fact, after a weak start, Nifty managed to post a record close. The gains in Nifty were largely led by the private banks as well as Reliance Industries. Nifty Bank's outperformance as compared to Nifty continues, except SBI and IndusInd Bank. All Nifty Bank constituents posted gains in the trading session yesterday. The broader market also continued to outperform the Nifty. Nifty mid-cap was up nearly 1%, while Nifty small-cap was up nearly 0.6%. As far as sectoral moves are concerned, the gains in realty were led by Prestige Estates and Macrotech developers, while the metal pack was led by Vedanta, NMDC and Nalco. Auto and pharma were some of the sectors that were the laggards yesterday. As far as the trading session today is concerned, we will be watching out for RBI's MPC meeting minutes. The Fed monetary policy report is also expected to come through, so keep an eye out on that. But as far as specific stocks are concerned, IT stocks will be on our radar after Accenture reported its numbers. Outsourcing deals were very strong, and FY24 guidance for the company has been narrowed. Sensex and FTSE index rejig is also expected to take place. Adani Ports will be included from the Sensex, while Wipro will be excluded from the Sensex. In fact, Nuvama is expecting net passive FII flow of 250 million in India on account of the FTSE rejig. Higher flows are expected in ICICI Bank and Bharti Airtel. Now, ahead of the GST meeting on June 22nd, fertilizer online gaming companies will also be in focus. As far as the Nifty is concerned, it's indicating a positive start to the trading session today.
Vamakshi, thanks a lot for that update. Now over to Upasna, who would list out the stocks to watch out for in today's trading session. Upasna, good morning.
Good morning. First up, let me start with Cipla. The company signs non-exclusive patent license agreement with Takeda for drug vonoprazan, and the agreement is signed for the Indian market. It's mainly for treated acid-related illness amongst patients. Next up is Jindal Stainless, the company to supply stainless steel to produce 100 Make in India freight wagons from Mozambique. Next up is GIC Housing Finance. The malware attack affected some of the end-user system of the company, but the company has immediately isolated the affected systems from the network to stop the further impact. Well, Aster DM will also be in focus, as according to sources, Olympus Capital Asia investment is likely to sell 10% equity, and floor price is seen around 331 per share, and deal size of the block is around 835 crores with an upsize at 1670 crores. Next up is GSK Pharma, that will also be in focus, as the company has executed an agreement with Go Aptiv Private Limited. This tie-up will simplify the operating model and accelerate volume growth for the company. Next up is Britannia Industries. The permanent workers of Taratala, Kolkata-based factory have accepted voluntary retirement scheme offered by the company. Next up is GE Power India. It has received letter of intent worth 243 crores from NTPC GE Power Services Private Limited. GM Financial will also be in focus, as SEBI passes order asking it not to act as a lead manager for debt issues till March 2025. Well, this is SEBI's order after interim one barring GM Financial from acting as a lead manager for debt issues. In addition, GM Financial has voluntarily agreed to stop IPO financing business. Hence, that stock will be in focus. Next up is Welspun Speciality. The company has received order from GPCB, that is Gujarat Pollution Control Board, directing the company to cease operations at its Bharuch unit. And lastly, Time Technoplast will also be in focus, as the company has received final approval from Petroleum and Explosive Safety Organization for manufacturing.
Thanks a lot, Upasana, for that update. And Mangalam is now joining in with cues from the F&O space. Mangalam, good morning. It's been range-bound consolidation on the Nifty, but we are making new highs. What's the setup looking like?
Well, it is exactly that. We are seeing range-bound consolidation with the Nifty making new highs. Nothing really to worry about. It's been a good week for the bulls because the Nifty bank broke out. We have the mid-cap index doing a lot better, and the Nifty is doing just nifty things after, conquering level after level. Importantly, the domestic market and the market itself is absorbing all the flows from the big, large trades that took place all through this week. And yesterday was no different. The big, large trades yesterday were PNB Housing Finance and nearly 2% equity trading hands exchanging hands in rate gain as well. That stock ended about 3% higher. Importantly, the FIIs continue to buy in index futures. So short covering and long addition continues. So yesterday purchase was close to 1750 crores, 16,000 long contracts added, about 13,000 shorts covered. So if you look at the table, that comes up for you. On June 14th, the FIIs were net short to the tune of 53%, and now they become net long to the tune of 57%. So the net contracts, which were lower by almost 24,000 in the negative, have now come to 72,000 in the positive. So in the last 4 sessions itself, you've had a swing of nearly 1 lakh contracts on the long side. Now with this market moving higher, and as we prep for the expiry week, the street is bracing for some sort of consolidation, and that's visible in the 23,600 call writing that we've seen. And if we were to break out of this consolidation, then maybe some punt buying at the 24,000 call. Not to say that the market will go there, but there is some punt buying out there. 23,500 put is equally active. So the option writers are placed for that range of 23,400 to 23,750. What would break this range out? Nifty Bank and Nifty IT. Let's see what that do. And we have a bunch of stocks on our radar as well. BSoft and GNFC are entering F&O ban. We pointed this possibility out yesterday. And out of band are India Cement, SAIL and Chambal Fertilizers.
Mangalam, thanks a lot for that F&O setup for the day. But moving on from the markets now, the finance minister held a pre-budget meeting with various industry bodies to understand the needs and demands of different sectors. ASSOCHAM President Sanjay Nair told CNBC TV 18 that the issues ranging from employment creation to fiscal consolidation were discussed in the meeting. Samir Somaya, the president of the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, said that the meeting focused on putting more money in the hands of low and middle income class and promote small and medium enterprises. Subrakant Panda of FICCI also said that the industry urged the government to continue with its capex thrust.
I think putting a little bit more money in the middle income and lower income hand was clearly one area, because people have lost a significant amount of their stock or wealth in the pandemic. Whole area of focus was to promote MSMEs and SMEs, and again, easy to talk about it, but in practicality, it was about ease of doing business for them.
For taxation, the topics were much more, that it was more about, make it simpler, make it easier, make the ease of doing business. But the conversation with the government was also much more on a much more broader space, as we said, about how do we look at making the innovation fund work better? How is it that we make the transition better? How do we generate employment? How do we create Indian manufacturing? It was done on 2 levels.
So broadly, even as private sector capex is picking up and the numbers are very encouraging in this regard, the government has done stupendous work in terms of handholding the economy through a difficult phase with a significant capex thrust, and we requested for that to be continued.
Some industry expectations there ahead of the budget, the dates for which are yet to be released. But now then we go across to Prime Minister Modi, who is at the International Yoga Day in Srinagar. Let's listen in.
यूनाइटेड नेशंस में इंटरनेशनल योगा डे का प्रस्ताव रखा था। भारत के इस प्रस्ताव का 177 देशों ने 177 समर्थन किया था, और ये अपने आप में एक रिकॉर्ड था। तब से योग दिवस लगातार नए रिकॉर्ड बनाता जा रहा है। 2015 में दिल्ली में कर्तव्य पथ पर 35,000 लोगों ने एक साथ योग किया। ये भी एक विश्व रिकॉर्ड था। पिछले साल मुझे अमेरिका में यूएन हेडक्वार्टर्स में योग दिवस के आयोजन का नेतृत्व करने का अवसर मिला था। इसमें भी 130 से ज्यादा देशों के लोगों ने भाग लिया था। योग की ये यात्रा अनवरत जारी है। भारत में आयुष विभाग ने योग प्रैक्टिशनर्स के लिए योगा सर्टिफिकेशन बोर्ड बनाया है।
Prime Minister Modi there addressing the audience on the International Yoga Day. Time for a short break here on Power Breakfast. Up next, we get you cues from the commodities market. Stay tuned. Back on the other side. Welcome back. And now in the latest of the UGC NET exam row, the CBI has registered a case against unknown persons for compromising the integrity of the examination. Over 9 lakh candidates across 317 Indian cities had appeared for the exam on Tuesday. The National Test Agency, which is in charge of conducting the exam, is already facing the heat for alleged irregularities with relations to the NEET, which is a single-window entrance test to all MBBS programs in India. Addressing the press, Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan said that the question paper got leaked on the dark web and admitted that the paper leak was an institutional failure by the NTA. He has also asked the issue should not be politicized. His comments came after the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi attacked the government and the Prime Minister over the issue. Now, the Delhi court granted bail to Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal in the money laundering case linked to the alleged liquor policy scam. The trial court rejected the Enforcement Directorate's plea for a stay on the bail order for 48 hours to approach the High Court. The court, however, imposed conditions on the bail, including prohibiting him from hampering the investigation or influencing the witnesses. He's also been asked to appear before the court whenever required and to cooperate with the investigation. Arvind Kejriwal is expected to be released today from Tihar jail. The Enforcement Directorate is also likely to move the Delhi High Court to seek a stay on the bail order. And Manisha Gupta now joins in with all the updates from the commodity space. Manisha, good morning. What are you picking up?
Well, I'm looking at stronger gains coming back in case of the commodity prices, Hormuz. I'll start with gold because we've seen 1.5% of jump there. Silver prices gained up by more than 3% overnight, and it's a 2-week highs for gold and silver, both of these prices. It is about the weaker than expected U.S. economic data, and also the ECB and the Bank of Canada have cut interest rates, and the markets do believe that Bank of England and Swiss National Bank could be the next ones before other banks also follow suit. So this is what seems to be supporting prices right now. It also is stronger gains that have continued for the crude oil prices, holding around that 7-week highs, almost inching towards that 86 mark. Here as well, there has been a strong decline in inventories of crude, gasoline, and distillate stocks in U.S. that has been supporting the markets. We're looking at stronger gains come in for copper as well, which gained 1.5% overnight. Zinc was up a percentage point as well. The coal prices are trading in the positive also. So after almost all of the week trading quite mixed, the last 24 to 48 hours in commodities have been good.
Manisha, thanks a lot for that update. And as we just highlighted, Prime Minister Narendra Modi flagged off celebrations at the Dal Lake in Srinagar on the occasion of the 10th International Yoga Day, where he was joined by over 7,000 participants. The theme for this year's celebration is Yoga for Self and Society, focusing on yoga's impact on personal well-being and community health. Across India, leaders including JP Nadda, Yogi Adityanath, Nayab Singh Saini also joined in the proceedings. Since its inception in 2014, the Prime Minister has led celebrations for yoga at various iconic sites across the country and abroad as well. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Power Breakfast from me and the team that put this show together. Thank you so much for watching. Bazaar Morning Call takes the action forward.